Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. There was a suffocating silence in the Newman household, the kind that only comes after tragedy, heavy, thick, and impossible to ignore. Sharon sat at the edge of her sofa, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling as she clutched the last photograph of her son, Noah. Her heart, shattered into a million unfixable pieces, couldn't comprehend that the boy who once filled her home with laughter and light was gone. The news of Noah's death had ripped through Genoa City like a lightning bolt, but for Sharon, it was more than just grief, it was the kind of agony that stripped away sanity. And soon, everyone would see a side of her that had been buried for years. Sharon's mind began to unravel, her thoughts darkening with each passing moment until all she could focus on was one thing: someone had to pay. In her tormented state, Sharon replayed every memory she had of Noah in her mind, his childhood giggle when he ran through the sprinkler in the backyard, his first heartbreak, his struggles to find his place in the world. Each image tore at her soul, but it was when she thought of his last few weeks alive that the madness began to take hold. Noah had been distant, depressed, and distracted. He had confided in her about his breakup, but Sharon hadn't realized just how deep his pain ran. Now, as she sat staring blankly at his phone messages, the dots began to connect in her tortured mind. It was her fault, Noah's ex-girlfriend. The one who had walked away, leaving him to drown in loneliness. The one who had destroyed his heart and, in Sharon's mind, led him straight to his death. That night, Sharon barely slept. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her. Lightning flashed across the sky as she paced the floor, muttering to herself, tears streaming down her face. She began searching through Noah's old things, desperate for clues, for something, anything, that would explain what had happened. But instead of closure, she found anger. There were text messages between Noah and his ex that showed their painful breakup. Words like "I can't do this anymore" and "you're better off without me" felt like daggers piercing her heart. Sharon's breathing grew shallow, her vision blurred with rage. She whispered the ex-girlfriend's name like a curse over and over again. "You did this to him," she hissed into the darkness. "You broke him." By morning, Sharon's grief had evolved into obsession. The once kind and nurturing woman who had spent years trying to hold her family together had been replaced by someone darker, colder, a version of Sharon driven by pure anguish. She began showing up unannounced at places she thought Noah's ex might be. She asked questions, subtle at first, but soon her tone became sharp and accusatory. The people around her noticed the change. Nick tried to talk to her, to calm her down, but Sharon wouldn't listen. She was convinced that there was more to Noah's death than anyone wanted to admit, and in her mind, his ex-girlfriend was hiding something. When Sharon finally confronted her, it wasn't in public. It was late one evening at Crimson Lights, the very coffee shop Sharon once ran with pride. The ex-girlfriend had come in, unaware that Sharon was there, and ordered a latte with trembling hands. Sharon watched her from the shadows, her eyes narrowing, her grief twisting into fury. She approached slowly, her voice eerily calm but her words laced with venom. "You have no idea what you've done," Sharon said. The young woman turned, startled. "Sharon, I'm so sorry for what happened to Noah. I never wanted, don't say his name," Sharon shouted, slamming her hand on the counter. "You don't get to say his name after what you did to him." Everyone in the cafe froze, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The girl stammered, trying to explain that she had broken up with Noah because she thought he needed time to focus on himself, that she loved him but didn't know how to help him anymore. But Sharon wasn't listening. Her grief had warped the truth into something else entirely. To her, the girl's tears were fake, her remorse a manipulation. "He was fine before you came along," Sharon spat. "You played with his heart, made him believe you cared, and then you crushed him. He wouldn't have given up if it weren't for you." The girl fled in tears, but Sharon didn't feel remorse. For the first time since Noah's death, she felt something, a sense of control, a target for her pain. In the days that followed, Sharon's mental state deteriorated further. She began isolating herself from everyone who cared about her. Mariah tried to reach her, but Sharon's responses were cold, detached, even paranoid. She claimed people were trying to cover up the truth about Noah's death, that there was a conspiracy to protect his ex-girlfriend. Nick, heartbroken and concerned, pleaded with her to seek help, but Sharon refused. "You didn't see what she did to him," she whispered one night, her eyes wild with grief. "You didn't hear the way he cried after she left. She killed him, Nick. Maybe not with her hands, but with her heart." It wasn't long before Sharon's grief started affecting her behavior in public. She showed up at the memorial service dressed in black, her hair disheveled, her expression distant. While others shared kind words about Noah, Sharon sat silently, her jaw clenched. When it was her turn to speak, she stood before the crowd, tears glistening in her eyes, but instead of giving a eulogy, she lashed out. "You all talk about how wonderful he was, but none of you really knew him," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You let him suffer. You let her destroy him." Gasps filled the room as she turned her gaze toward Noah's ex, who sat in the front row sobbing. "You should be the one in the ground, not him," Sharon screamed before Nick pulled her away. After that outburst, Sharon became the talk of Genoa City. Friends whispered about her behind closed doors, wondering if she had finally lost her mind for good. Some pitied her, others feared her, but no one knew how to help. The grief had consumed her completely. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and spent hours sitting in Noah's old room, talking to his pictures as if he were still there. "Tell me what to do, sweetheart," she whispered. "Tell me how to make it right." Sometimes she thought she could hear his voice answering her, a soft echo that urged her to seek revenge. Nick grew desperate. He contacted Dr. Anderson, hoping therapy might help Sharon regain her grip on reality. But even in counseling, Sharon's delusions deepened. She told the therapist that Noah's ex had planned everything, that she had manipulated him emotionally to push him over the edge. She insisted she had proof, fabricated text messages, distorted memories, all of which existed only in her mind. The doctor warned Nick that Sharon was suffering from a severe psychological break triggered by grief and guilt. But to Sharon, the doctor was just another person trying to silence her truth. Soon, Sharon began taking matters into her own hands. She started following Noah's ex, taking photos of her, tracking her movements. One night, she even broke into her apartment, convinced she'd find evidence of foul play. Instead, she found a box of Noah's old belongings that the girl hadn't been able to part with: letters, pictures, a necklace he'd given her. For a moment, Sharon froze, tears streaming down her face as she realized how much the girl had loved him too. But then, just as quickly, her grief twisted that realization into rage. "You kept these to torture yourself, didn't you?" she whispered. "Because deep down, you know what you did." The police were eventually called when the ex-girlfriend reported Sharon for harassment. Nick and Faith begged Sharon to stop before things went too far, but she refused. "I'm not crazy," she snapped. "I'm a mother trying to get justice for her son." But justice had nothing to do with it anymore. This was obsession born from madness. The truth was, Sharon wasn't only blaming Noah's ex, she was blaming herself. Deep down, she knew she had missed the signs, failed to save her boy. And it was easier to transfer that guilt onto someone else than to face the unbearable truth that she couldn't protect him. As weeks passed, Sharon's reality and delusion became indistinguishable. She began seeing Noah in her dreams, hearing his voice calling her name. In one haunting vision, he asked her to forgive and move on. But Sharon wasn't ready to let go. "How can I move on when you're gone?" she whispered to the empty room. "How can I forgive when she's still breathing?" Her grief had taken over completely, transforming her into a version of herself she no longer recognized. The final breaking point came one evening when Sharon found herself standing outside the ex-girlfriend's apartment again, clutching a framed photo of Noah. She stared at it for a long time before setting it on the doorstep. "You'll never understand what you took from me," she whispered. Then she turned and walked away into the darkness, tears streaming down her face, her mind fractured beyond repair. Days later, Sharon checked herself into Fairview Psychiatric Hospital. Nick and Mariah stood by her side, finally convincing her that she needed help. When the doctors asked why she had come, Sharon's voice broke. "Because I can't stop seeing him," she said softly. "And I can't stop hating her." It was the most honest thing she had said in months. In the sterile white walls of the hospital, Sharon finally began to confront her grief. Slowly, through therapy and time, she started to understand that her hatred for Noah's ex was misplaced, that her pain had needed an outlet, and she had chosen the wrong one. The road to healing would be long, maybe endless, but she was willing to try. Because deep down, she knew Noah wouldn't want his mother to live consumed by vengeance. He would want her to find peace. And maybe, just maybe, someday she would. But for now, Sharon Newman, the woman who once radiated warmth and hope, was a shadow of herself, sitting alone in a hospital room, whispering her son's name into the quiet. "I'm sorry, Noah," she murmured through her tears. "I just couldn't let you go." Even in her fractured state, one truth remained unshakable: a mother's love, even when twisted by grief and madness, never truly dies. It only lingers, haunting, aching, eternal. Fairview's corridors were quiet, but not peaceful. The sterile walls hummed with the faint echoes of broken minds, people whispering to ghosts, crying out in the night, haunted by things that no one else could see. Sharon Newman had become one of them. For the first few days, she barely spoke, barely moved. She sat by the window, staring at the garden below, where patients wandered aimlessly like lost souls. Her eyes were vacant, her heart heavy, her mind still trapped in the last moments of Noah's life. The doctors tried to reach her, but she wasn't ready. Every time they mentioned Noah's name, her body would tense, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The grief was still raw, an open wound that refused to close. She'd whisper to herself sometimes, the words almost inaudible. "He was my baby. He wasn't supposed to go first." Those who overheard pitied her, knowing that no treatment could ever truly mend the pain of losing a child. Nick came to visit almost daily in those first few weeks, though each visit seemed to hurt him more than the last. He'd sit across from her, trying to bridge the distance between them, but Sharon's gaze would drift past him as if he weren't even there. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly one day, taking her hand. She didn't respond at first. Then, after a long silence, she murmured, "I'm not alone. He's here." Nick's stomach dropped. "Sharon, honey. Noah's gone." Her head snapped toward him, eyes flashing with sudden intensity. "No. Don't you dare say that," she cried. "He's not gone. I can feel him. He talks to me." Her voice cracked, and she turned back to the window, tears streaming down her face. "He doesn't want me to forget." That night, Sharon woke from a dream, her heart racing. In the dream, Noah had been standing in the garden below, his face glowing in the moonlight. He was smiling, peaceful, almost angelic, but when she tried to reach him, he faded away. She screamed his name, but all that remained was his voice, echoing faintly, "Let me go, Mom." When she awoke, her pillow was soaked with tears. It was after that dream that Sharon finally agreed to start therapy in earnest. Her sessions with Dr. Reeves began with hesitation, each word pulled from her like a thorn. But slowly, the wall she'd built began to crack. "I don't know who I am anymore," Sharon confessed one day, her voice trembling. "I used to be strong. I used to take care of everyone. But now, I can't even take care of myself." Dr. Reeves nodded gently. "You've been through unimaginable loss, Sharon. Losing a child can make even the strongest person feel like they're unraveling. But what you're feeling, the anger, the guilt, it's all part of grief. You blamed Noah's ex-girlfriend because it gave your pain a direction. It made your loss feel less senseless." Sharon stared at her hands, twisting the tissue in her fingers. She broke him. She left him when he needed her most. "And maybe she did," the doctor said softly. "But that doesn't make her the reason he's gone. Noah's pain wasn't her fault. Just like it wasn't yours. That last sentence hit Sharon like a slap. It wasn't yours. But how could it not be? She was his mother. She was supposed to protect him. In the following weeks, Sharon began keeping a journal at Dr. Reeves' suggestion. At first, the pages were filled with incoherent thoughts, rants, anger, confusion, but eventually, they began to shift into something else. Memories. She wrote about Noah's childhood, about the way he'd sneak cookies before dinner and the nights they'd stay up watching movies when he couldn't sleep. Writing about him brought both comfort and pain, but it also began to untangle the chaos in her mind. Outside Fairview, life moved on, but inside, Sharon was trapped in the slow process of healing. One afternoon, as she sat by the window again, she noticed a young woman visiting another patient. She froze. The girl had the same hair color, the same soft features as Noah's ex. Her chest tightened. For a moment, she was back in Genoa City, back at Crimson Lights, screaming accusations. The guilt hit her like a wave. That night, Sharon dreamed again. This time, she saw herself standing over Noah's ex, shouting, blaming, pushing her away. But Noah appeared behind her, shaking his head. "That's not what I wanted, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "You hurt her. She's hurting too." When she woke up, Sharon couldn't shake the image. For the first time, she realized that the girl she'd blamed wasn't her enemy. She was another victim of loss. Weeks later, Sharon asked Nick for something unexpected. "Can you get a message to her?" To Noah's ex? Nick hesitated, unsure if it was a good idea, but Sharon's eyes were clearer than they'd been in months. I need to tell her I'm sorry." The girl agreed to meet with Dr. Reeves present. When she walked into the hospital's visitor room, her eyes were red, her hands trembling. Sharon stood when she saw her, tears welling instantly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sharon broke the silence. "I don't know how to begin," she said softly. "I said terrible things to you. I wanted to hate you because it was easier than facing the truth. I thought if I blamed you, I wouldn't have to blame myself." The young woman began to cry, shaking her head. "You had every right to hate me. I broke his heart. I thought I was helping him, giving him space. I didn't know he was slipping away." Sharon reached out, her voice breaking. "We both failed him in different ways. But he wouldn't want us to carry that forever. I see that now." They cried together for a long time, two women connected by one tragic thread, the love they'd both had for Noah. When the girl left, Sharon felt something she hadn't felt in months: release. The burden of hatred had lifted, if only a little. From that day forward, Sharon's recovery took a slow but steady turn. She attended group therapy sessions, sharing her story with others who had lost children. She listened to their pain, realizing she wasn't alone in her madness, her grief, or her guilt. Each story reminded her that survival was possible, even when life seemed unbearable. Mariah and Faith visited often, their presence grounding Sharon in reality. One afternoon, Faith brought a drawing of Noah she'd made, a portrait from memory. Sharon stared at it for a long time before whispering, "He'd be proud of you." Faith smiled faintly. "He'd be proud of you too, Mom. For fighting your way back." Still, recovery wasn't linear. There were days Sharon would wake up in tears, reaching for a son who wasn't there. There were nights she'd sit awake, staring at his old photo, whispering apologies into the dark. But there were also days of quiet peace, where she could talk about Noah without breaking down completely.